All right, Robert, speaking of some other celebrity who might be going to jail, but probably not, Alec Baldwin. So there's a lot of, I won't say miscommunications. People are not necessarily understanding what's going on. There was an article in the New York Post saying Alec Baldwin has raised a defense that he cannot be sued by Halyna Hutchins' husband and son in the wrongful death lawsuit because he has an indemnity clause with the other producers or production company of the film Rust. I flipped you his motion. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not exactly how it's going. He might have an indemnification clause in his and his production company's contract with the producers or the whatever who else it was that put together the movie, the film Rust. That does not preclude or bar Halyna Hutchins' husband and son from suing him for wrongful death. That might just make him get reimbursed in the event he's found guilty by the company. I want to say production company, but I'll just say company now because I forget which. So he filed basically a motion to be indemnified by
an arbitration petition.
Okay, so that's okay. So this is the question I had. Everyone out there, just so everyone appreciates, he's not saying Halyna Hutchins' husband cannot sue. What he's basically saying is, if he sues and I'm found guilty, I'm going to be held harmless and indemnified by this other company, which agreed to do so by virtue of our production agreement with Rust. Why is it in arbitration? What portion of this is in arbitration? The Hutchins wrongful death lawsuit or another lawsuit?
So what it is he's been sued. And so under his contractual agreement with other production companies, because there's like a bunch of them involved. You can follow Eric Hunley and Mark Grobert, America's Untold Stories, for more detail about this. Grobert understands all the intricacies in Hollywood. But basically, he had an agreement with some other production companies that if anything went wrong on set effectively, that he got blamed for, they would indemnify him. Now, there's things like contractual indemnification, equitable indemnification, contribution. None of these things impact the suit against him by the father or the son. They only impact what source of funds will be used to pay for his attorney's fees in that case, and what source of funds are available to settle the case, and what source of funds are available to pay any judgment. That's all this is. So really, it's only very indirectly related to the other case. Now, their contract said that if they had any dispute about any matter, this is between Baldwin and the production company, is that it would go to arbitration. An arbitrator familiar with the movie industry located in New York. So in a particular arbitration group called JAMS. I'm not a fan of JAMS, but I'm not a fan of any of the arbitration groups, but that's another story. So he files a petition in arbitration to say they're not honoring the indemnification agreement. Please make them honor the indemnification agreement. He had to file that in arbitration because that's what his contract with them required. It has no direct impact on the suit. And now what's unusual is two things. First, in a JAMS arbitration petition, they usually require everything related to it be confidential as part of the agreement to be part of that arbitration process. Clearly, he didn't do that by publicly disclosing it. Probably no major consequence from that, but there's a potential issue there, unless they had a different provision in their particular contract or arbitration clause. And then the other part is all he needed to do to claim indemnification is say, I have a contract with this company. I have been sued related to an incident that arises out of this. Here's an attachment of the suit. End of story. Yeah. Instead, they use it. It's the reason why it was publicly disclosed. They use it as his public defense. And by making it a legal filing, for example, Rudy Giuliani is still being held liable by the court in the Smartmatic to go forward in the trial, despite his argument that he had legal privilege for what he said because the court limited legal privilege to things you say in court. Now, I think the court is wrong about that, but that's another story. But what happens is when you file something that's a legal pleading, it can be publicly reported on without liability of the party reporting on it. And so the net effect of it is that everybody has immunity. So if you want to get your statement out, your story out, usually a very effective way to do so is to put it in court. And so that's what that's like 80% of what's in his. And it's the reason why some people were confused by it, thinking it somehow impacted the other suit. is his defense. He puts in stuff he had absolutely no need to put into the indemnification provisions that didn't really materially relate or were necessary.
The text messages between him and Halyna Hutchins' husband, Robert. So in Quebec, at least, we call it like calling into warranty. Basically saying, I'm being sued. This person has agreed to hold me harmless, and they shall assume my defense. Go ahead and do it. It's I don't know how many. What was it? 7. It was not 70 pages. It was long. Alec Baldwin, I mean, he basically goes into meticulous detail, which makes him look like a world-class a-hole in what he's alleged. That like he was trying to settle this lawsuit with Halyna Hutchins' family by promising them the proceeds of the profit of the movie if they would.
He was trying to get them to leverage production of the movie. Say we'll donate the profits to you. So please help us make sure this movie happens because we'll do the movie in her name. While of course he still includes all his provisions about it's not really his fault. It's kind of her fault. He implies that again. He does all of that at the same time. It's all about him being a good guy. He just wanted to finish the movie to help the family. He was trying to settle and resolve everything. He was the one, and really he didn't even do anything wrong because really she told him to point the gun at her. So, I mean, it was classic Alec Baldwin.
He would never, remember his George Stephanopoulos interview. I would never point a gun at someone and pull a trigger. Never. Except I did it because she told me to. So I did it. And then he tries to like float this. It could have been millions of dollars of profits from this movie if I could have gotten the crew back. But all you had to do was not start a fight with me and not speak ill of me and not hold a press conference where you were going to besmirch my name or cause animosity that would make the finishing of this movie possible so you could get millions of dollars. I mean, I'm reading this and I'm like, this is narcissism on par with Jussie Smollett narcissism. But the bottom line is it was all useless because he's being sued. Even if the production company is bound to hold him harmless, I hope they stay, for Alec's sake, I hope they're liquid. I hope they stay in business because if they go bankrupt and they can't hold him harmless and they can't assume his defense,
these are shell companies.
Yeah,
this
so
is just
it's not like
just about
Hutchins
insurance money. It's how much insurance is out there. That's all, and they're fighting over which insurance pot is going to pay out.
No, but and even if the companies go totally bust and they only had $1 million insurance, it's not like Halyna Hutchins' family does not get to sue Baldwin. He'll just say, "Good, I've got to hold harmless with a bankrupt shell of a company." But what he put out, it was over the top. But the idea that he was using the prospect of a settlement, which would have consisted of finishing the movie and then promising them profits in her name. Just so you know, by the way, when anyone says in your name, in honor to, they're getting ready to rip you off and lie to you. That's one of my life lessons. I might be traumatized by that lesson, but also he's just a pathological a-hole of a liar, narcissist. It was the worst day of the other person's life. It was the worst day of his life, which I have no doubt it was. But you need to have some insight and back up and say, if I make that allegation in a lawsuit, this was the worst day of my life. Feel bad for me because I would never point a gun and shoot it, but I did because she told me to. You have to know how that's going to be misread. So he files, but I guess I don't understand why he filed that publicly. But
get his defense out.
Yeah, no, but I mean, does he not get sanctioned? Could he not get sanctioned?
No, that's all legitimate. That's all. Okay. There's nothing. He didn't have to publish it. He didn't have to include all that detail. But the only thing that could prohibit it is a confidentiality clause, and the only person who could enforce that is the other party, not the family or anyone else. So it was a PR stunt, which has a small legal component, but was mostly a PR stunt, used for those purposes.
Now Ariana, I remember we were supposed to do something back when I was in Virginia with Tim Pool, because I remember you telling me about your story. Screenshotted. I have not forgotten. Aren't the companies created to make a movie paper only? In other words, have no money.
They have insurance. They have insurance and bonds.
And what's the insurance? It'll max out at $5 million. What is it in the States? 10?
Don't know. It can be anywhere from $1 million to $50 million.
Okay. Well, I mean, and I'm not saying this for Alec. I just hope this for the family that it's that line from Good Will Hunting when what's her name? What was the name of the woman? The British woman with the jawbone. Very very beautiful woman.
Minnie Driver.
Minnie Driver, where she said, you know, like when what's his name? Matt Damon was saying, you know, you're a slush fund. You made your money off your dad's death. And she's like, there's not a day in my life I wouldn't give all that money back to have another day with my father. There's not any money on earth that can possibly right this wrong, can make Halyna Hutchins' husband and son ever complete again. So when you say, like, I hope they have 50 million, good. That will never make anybody happy, and it will never make them happy.